this session in particular, for the afternoon now, we're going to be focusing in the tent how climate action research within Trinity is impacting policy on European and global levels. And we have some trailblazers in the room. So for this session, we're going to focus on how students have impacted policy during their time in Trinity. So we're joined by Zara Hussey, who is currently studying a master's in global challenges and sustainability here. She also, wait for this list, works as the Director of International Relations at Climate Cardinals and is the Ireland and UK Ambassador with She Changes Climate and a Global Shaper for the World Economic Forum. I thought my job title was long. And Johnny Dabrowski is also joining us, who's a second-year Geography and Political Science student who is a consultant and coordinator of the Climate Education Coalition at earthday.org. And I think everyone thinks I've been extra hyping you up, but genuinely like crazy impact while also trying to have, just manage exams and all those kind of things. So I wanted to talk about today, and I am using this tent to kind of be as open about how we as higher education institutes and staff and support staff can support people who are trying to do this work. Because I think we have heard it again and again and again, how young people are great at doing all this work, but it takes a huge mental toll and it takes a huge time toll. And I really want to hear from you guys how we should be doing better to help you have done the work you've been doing. Yeah, so you can rain fire. No one's around with with any clout. We're fine. So, Sarah, do you want to kick us off? Tell us about your work, and then we'll go with Johnny.
So yeah, as Anne said, I am currently a master's student here at Trinity. It's actually I'm here at Trinity, but it's also a joint program with other European universities. So it's called Charm EU, which is the kind of European coalition. And I'll be finishing up that at the end of the year. And before that, I am a loyal Trinity. I did my bachelor's here, so I went straight in to my master's, and I did that in business and German here. And then in conjunction to my studies kind of the whole way along, even while doing the business degree, I just fell in love with environmental action and really tried to find ways to do that outside of the classroom. I was lucky to have a few modules in managing climate change and other kind of optional modules, but I chose all of them, even though they're optional. And it's great to hear that there's now more mandatory ones for first-year students as well, which I'm sure we'll get onto later. But yeah, and then throughout that process, I kind of started into working with other projects, other organizations, and yeah, here I am with working with Climate Cardinals, which is amazing. They're the largest youth-led climate NGO in the world. And we work in closing the climate translation gap of climate information. So far, we're only 4 years in the running, and we've translated over 3 million words into over 100 languages, and that's to try and make climate education as accessible to, as possible. And it is the people who don't speak English that tend to be the people who are most affected by the results of of disaster. So that's kind of the work that I'm doing there. And then with She Changes Climate, we are working more on a kind of grassroots level where I'm trying to implement as best as I can their mission of building a 50-50 parity of men to women at all levels of climate decision making. So as the Ireland and UK ambassador, that's kind of my job to try and see that that happens as much as possible here. And then when we go to kind of high level dialogues, that we bring and we're representing, our Irish team over there with as much of a kind of 50-50 parity. And that grew out of COP26 when there were 0 women on the presidential committee as well. So so that's kind of the mission I'm doing with them as well. But yeah, Johnny?
Yeah, thanks. So hello everyone. And what I'm doing is very close to what Climate Cardinals and Zara are doing. So my name is Johnny Dabrowski. I'm from Poland, from Warsaw. It's my second year here at this incredible campus. I'm studying politics and geography. And a few years before I became a student here, I started being a climate activist. Maybe you recognize Greta Thunberg. I joined her movement in 2019. And in a very short period of time, I became an international activist. But since the beginning, my focus was climate education. compulsory climate education, first in my country, then in Europe, and later in the entire world. To make a long story short, I'm coordinating the Climate Education Coalition, which is a coalition of more than 100 youth and civil society organizations, which focus is to advocate for compulsory climate education worldwide. So climate education is what brings us together here. What we're advocating for is compulsory modules in schools and at the universities. What Climate Cardinals are doing is actually educating people already, especially those most vulnerable ones, which is fantastic. So I think what is most needed for us is, to give us the largest number of opportunities you can, and maybe to make it more up to date. This week in New York, the Pact of the Future has been adopted by the UN General Assembly, and if you look into it, one of the main points is youth engagement and finance for youth engagement worldwide, to engage young people in UN conferences, UN process, advocacy, and with that, I'll be also very, I think it'll be great also to talk about engaging in COP today, if you're interested in this, because in 1 month we're going to have the next climate COP in Baku in Azerbaijan, and I'll be happy to tell a few words how you can engage, how you can go to such a conference maybe next year in Brazil. So in summary, my focus is climate education internationally. I work mainly for the EU policy, but with our friends worldwide, we try to push it in every country.
Yeah. So we all met because of Trinity's observational status for COP. Jane Hackett is going to talk about it a little bit later as well, but I think you guys talking about your experience would also be helpful. But first, maybe we'll talk about, so we've kind of covered how you came to this type of work. But I think it would be really interesting to talk about maybe what are some of the biggest challenges in this type of work within an institute like this, because then we can kind of start having a conversation about like what barriers are within our capabilities to change / other people are coming to the room later that we can ask this question to. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like I'm not much older than you. No.
Much younger than me.
I'm much younger. No, I'm literally 2 years older or something. It feels like such a difference though. But I did my first semester, first year in person in Trinity and then went online. And I mean, naturally it's going to be hard when things go online to engage students, but then as a student to kind of like, even if you have the motivation to kind of try and like reach out and find those places to follow those passions that are outside of the classroom and what you're kind of doing day to day to just pass your exams. And for me, that was a big part because I was studying business, but I knew I wanted to go into environmental action. So I found that was a hard thing to figure out, not only because unless I was interested directly in environmental science, you can join the environmental SOC through that. I felt that there wasn't an example of a pathway that you could kind of replicate or at least take inspiration from. In business, it was the polar opposite, where there was like so many examples of like people kind of coming in. You had like grad programs, like you could envision where you wanted to do, or between your 3rd and 4th year, you had internships, all this kind of stuff. And you really had to pave the way then yourself to just trial and error and figure out, okay, is this the area that I'm interested in? And is this even established enough to see myself going into this yet? And that was hard to figure out, again, when you hadn't them kind of coming to you, you had to really just push for it yourself. I'm going to ask you again what the question was, because I actually totally forgot. Oh, yeah, no, the challenges. Yeah. So that was a challenge that wasn't really anyone's fault. We know that. And it was just something that I think helped at the end of the day, because you got to really like grow from it and figure out, that time away from the classroom kind of being fed maybe a certain kind of way of conducting your career, I was really able to kind of just sit back at home and just see what else was out there. And that was overseas, and that's the organizations that I started with were international organizations, and because everything was remote anyway. And then on the other side within Trinity at the same time, I got a really deep interest in helping my fellow female peers in their kind of mission for having a space to build more confidence in their career. And, you know, it didn't matter what degree background you had to, you know, come from for that. But I found such a stark contrast when I went from online to, no, other way around, in person to online, that there was a huge leap in female participation in the classroom. And I was like, this can't just be like my experience. So I ended up doing a 5-month research project on it just myself, and interviewed like loads of different professors and students and sent out surveys. And it ended up there was like across campus, there was a like drastic increase in female participation in the online space versus in person. So from that, I really felt like, okay, I'm not happy with this kind of just like sitting there, because when things go back in person, like, you know, there's nothing in place already to ensure that that stays the way it is now. So I went about trying to build a women business society in Trinity. So this was like kind of a challenge that I experienced, is that it actually had been tried before me multiple times and it never was able to go through. And it was an interesting thing, because I thought it was actually just like a no-brainer. Like, I was like, okay, either someone has done this before, or like, you know, it hasn't been thought of, like there's something I'm missing here. But anyway, it ended up happening that we did as much as we could on our end. We kind of brought together a fantastic group of other students who were dying for this service. Like, they wanted it. There was huge demand there. We had to get over 200 signatures to submit it to the Central Societies Committee, and we got that in like 12 hours, I think. Like, we got it so quick, and still it didn't go through, unfortunately. So we were kind of continuously experiencing barriers there. That this is another side of sustainability. It's not directly environmental, but the social side, where kind of the building that, you know, women's empowerment to women in climate action or otherwise, it does start in these kind of spaces. Like, you build your confidence here and you kind of mend those leaky pipelines so that when you do graduate, you can kind of feel that confidence to go into whatever space you want to. I'm delighted to say that the society now exists. It's in its 2nd year running. So we went again, we went and submitted it again. We kind of made changes, we got a new partner, we got like really great professors on board as well to give us great advice with it. But I think just, it was just something that I was really experiencing, like, this is only going to add good to the Institute, like, to try and like, help students. So trying to add more spaces like that, or create less barriers would be, yeah, brilliant.
Thanks. So maybe just quickly, I think the challenges for us are very natural. I mean, from my perspective, it's a different perspective than yours. I mean, man, it's totally different, especially in the international community. So also really respect for what you have done with She Changes Climate. From my perspective, it's age mostly. We are young. We have, it's an advantage, but also it's a disadvantage in negotiations and advocacy, because you politicians look at you from a perspective of someone who is higher, who is more clever, probably is, right? That's the point, more experienced. And so, first of all, I'll just give you a few examples. This summer I had an incredible privilege to attend G7 summit in Italy for education in Trieste. And before I was going there, I had a conversation with my mom. She's always very supportive, and she said, but you need to look like them. You need to bring good clothes, because this will be a closed meeting. You cannot look like an activist. You need to look like them. It was a very good advice. So we have to adjust sometimes. Clothing is just an example. Not to look more serious, but just to do our job. That's the point. Because in some situations, people, especially ministers, prime ministers, will not talk to you if you look strange or weird. That's how it works. The second thing is, I think preparation and knowledge helps a lot. When you read a lot about your subject, when you're really expert in it, it helps a lot. I remember negotiations on the Global Environmental Facility in Vancouver, where we were advocating policymakers to integrate climate change in the largest environmental fund. And if it wasn't for literally days of preparing for the summit, reading reports, then let's say my engagement wouldn't be significant there, and if it was to some people. So that's also really important, to prepare yourself, and not just to be confident, but to be informed. And I think these are very big challenges, and you can just overcome them by facing them in a realistic way. Just you need to see what your disadvantages are, and what comes in the way becomes the way, and then you succeed, I think.
Yeah, I think you both kind of touched upon it as well, that the idea of showcasing that there are different ways to be part of this conversation. Like, there are different ways to show up, there are different ways to present, there are different ways to absorb knowledge. And I think it's quite hard within an institution like ours to teach what's unteachable in some ways, other than by learning yourself. So like, you've both talked about how you had to go do it yourself to solve the problem. And I suppose what I'm wondering are, were there things we could have done that could have helped you learn the ways a little bit easier? Like, you had support from the professors about setting up the society and things like that, and then you're learning within a peer group, and that makes things somewhat easier, I hope. But I think, like, same as you guys, like, I haven't had a standard career. I have a very transdisciplinary career, and I think we talk a lot as an institute as we're very transdisciplinary, but what that means as a career path, I think, can be harder to understand. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I suppose what I was wondering on the other side then is if there's anything that we could do to make it easier. I don't know if either of you have thoughts on it. Because it is an education point of view, I suppose that's my point, but it's just not a textbook.
Yeah, to make it easier, I think that if you have a group of people who are uninterested in the subject, you cannot make it easier to them. What we try to do with education is for every student who finishes high school and then university to have a basic knowledge about climate change, because we believe this is one of the largest, if not the largest, crisis of the 21st century, and for sure a crisis which impacts everyone. That's why everyone needs to know about it, because everyone participates in it in many ways. Regarding advocacy, also from my experience, I would say conferences are really important to provide young people with platforms where they can present themselves, but also where they can learn from. Platforms, I remember there was one conference, it was called Youth for Climate in Milan in 2021 in Italy, and the goal was to get representatives from every country in the world to meet ministers of climate. And that was very educating, also very mobilizing. Also, I would say, programs from universities or corporates to make the way from university to having a job, a green job, easier. So creating programs, for example, university together with a corporate, choosing 10 best people from a group, giving them internship for 5 months, and then maybe some of them will end up working for, JP Morgan Sustainability, whatever, Google. Yeah.
I think that's a really good point. Siobhan McQuaid was just here talking about how she works in nature positive enterprise and how we need to make that as to funders, to financiers, but I think to students as career paths, it's all, there are other ways to work within the system we have, but work with influence, right? That's kind of the point. You didn't come in on the last one.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Yeah, I just kind of what Johnny was saying, I think just education is power with all of this. Like, there's an element of where people are scared of what they don't know, and lots of, you know, maybe students who don't have an interest in it yet, it's purely just because they don't know how it relates to them and how it will relate to them, or they can't see themselves in a career that is anyway connected with it. And again, what Johnny was saying, it will affect all of us at some stage, you know, personally or in your career. It's going to come in, you know, even if you're in finance, you're going to be going into like really strict sustainable finance area. Like it's going to, you know, meander in there in some way. So having the modules within the classroom, I think, is huge. When we had our managing climate change one when I was doing business, everyone was actually so engaged. Again, like this was during COVID, everything was online and it's hard to get students engaged in those kind of environments, but everyone was really engaged because we had loads of guest speakers in. And they're all from really different backgrounds, have come into climate after, you know, 10 years in finance or engineering or otherwise. And they're able to see like very untraditional paths, and it really was very engaging. And then later down the road, I was working with this organization called Just Dig It, and they regreen arid land in Africa. And I then gave an online webinar on that in Trinity, and then that was then used as material for that module later on. But that was a really, I think, good way of being able to see an example of someone who's working in this space that is like directly close to impact in regreening Africa, but also a student, and you're like, oh, okay, you're able to see like, God, someone, you know, who looks like me or similar age as me. Age is a big thing. That I can actually see myself maybe doing something similar. So even representation is like a huge part of all that.
We're going to come to the end soon. Are there any questions in the audience before we finish up? No? Yeah. Yeah, I'll repeat it back. Yeah.
Similar to what Anna asked earlier on, so like, what about for those students who like are really interested in climate and like could potentially be interested in kind of doing more stuff you guys have done, but don't know about, like, I never knew about how to go to a conference when I was in an undergrad, or I'm like, there's no one important here, right? So like, stuff that the college is not showing us or not helping us do. Like, what do you think? Like, you look at your classmates and they're not going to the things that you're going to. Like, why is that? How can you? Well, not you, but like, how can the college help them do that? Because the organizations that you spoke about are international organizations.
Yeah.
Like, and so much going on at international level. Yeah. But what can like them do or we do to like kind of promote it like closer to home?
So how can we showcase pathways to students who maybe don't even know it's an option? And I think in addition to that, in talking about representation, like how you finance that stuff, like how does anyone know how to finance that stuff? Like even getting to the conferences or who to ask for support and all those kind of things.
Yeah. Just talking about the conferences you were talking about, when a few years ago, I remember I went to one and I was like the youngest there by like genuinely 10 years. And it was so interesting. I went in and I was completely like, oh God, this is so nervous, trying to like, you know, fake it till you make it kind of thing, like put on a brave face. And we did like intense, like it was a full day of roundtable discussions. And it was so interesting. I knew more than them, much more than them. These were all people who were coming into this space, having different backgrounds, and they knew that they had to start learning about this kind of stuff. And if you're to look at like, you know, the companies that they're associated with, usually like in the private sector, they're wanting to appear as though they are on top of things, but they're not really. But it then gives a really false impression for us as students as to understand, okay, where are actually like these organizations that I'm hoping to then maybe go into and be, you know, a sustainable person within there. God, they seem light years ahead. Maybe I can't get myself there. Everyone is much further behind than you think. So that's first of all, like, just kind of wrap your head around the fact that like you're absolutely fine and like you will be able to get in there absolutely no problem. The conferences was just good exposure to kind of like ground myself in. And it is really difficult, as Anne was saying, like there's a huge money element for lots of them as well. But I don't think they're necessary. The other thing is like when it comes to kind of bringing that into college, now at the careers fair was like last week or something like that, there was a lot more where I was seeing where they weren't just talking about your like typical grad roles, they were talking about alternative like sustainability roles. So pushing that maybe a little bit more, like even having like a section within the careers fair that is like literally like green jobs, you know, Johnny was kind of talking about like promoting that would be a huge thing. But if you're looking for kind of like tangible ways of actually making like just exploring what's out there, because this is the thing, you don't have a list. Like I had a list in my business undergrad of like literally all the places I could end up going into, but I just went like ham on LinkedIn and just like looked everywhere, and just really wanted to like find all the places within Ireland that are doing the work that I was doing international, but I want to do it here. I don't want to be making all the change abroad, but you know, but not feeling like that work's being impacted here. So that's what I can say as well. That's again kind of back to the education is power, just really trying to understand what is there, the kind of understand the landscape, and then again you'll be able to kind of pinpoint and just reach out. People are so nice, especially in this space. So nice to just being like, yeah, totally, let's hop on a Zoom call and let me like tell you about the work I'm doing or something like that. Just put yourself out there. Like that's the biggest thing I did, and yeah, helped a lot. Hopefully that helps. Sorry.
So maybe I could just quickly adapt to this. So maybe to give you a perspective, for the COP, for example, you need 3 things to go to the COP. First, of course, is passion, because if you don't have passion to go there, you don't have a goal, there is no sense to go there. I guess you have, for sure. As you're here making notes, so I guess there's passion there. The second thing you need is an accreditation, is a badge. And that's a tricky one. Because it's not the university who decides about the badge, it's the United Nations. And they can give you 1, they can give you 2, they can give you 0. And the third thing is funding for travel, for accommodation, for food. So money is crucial, but it's in the third place. Because if you don't have accreditation, you don't have a place to go. If you don't have passion, you will not find accreditation. So taking this to the university level, I would say it would be fantastic if Trinity, for example, had a program for students to go to the COP. I have seen many students from Harvard, from Penn at the previous COPs, lots of them accredited by the university, going there as part of their dissertation programs. So I think it's a good idea to discuss with the provost, with sustainability team, maybe with also some departments, because that will be an excellent opportunity also for research for students from sustainability, politics, environmental sciences. Because at the COP you have scientists, policymakers, entrepreneurs. It's a fantastic place for research. And also for climate action, of course. So taking this into account, this would be a great idea. However, you know, also it doesn't depend entirely on the university, for example, how many badges the university gets. So I think that ideally this could work as a, you know, as a project that could be supported financially from the university, for example, but that could also work in the way that is the students who are trying to get a badge, the accreditation from particular organizations accredited to the UN to get this, because this is a really tricky part, and maybe connected with some corporates or with some programs, which could also allow funding for this. I don't think it's impossible because I've seen it in many universities, especially for the universities in the US. I think we have a huge potential to do it, let's put it this way. But I think it would definitely have to work as a endeavor of both the university and both interested to go.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. We're going to finish up now if there's no other questions, but my final question to you both is what gives you hope to keep going at the moment?
Yeah, what's brilliant about the work that we're choosing to go into is it is passion-led. So there is a lot of the time where you're kind of tired, you're having off days or something. I don't feel like it's work. I genuinely don't. And that's what keeps me going in a very simplistic way. Specifically within this area, something I'm deeply passionate about and continuously aspiring to do more in, and that's kind of what steers me on, is nature-based solutions and just kind of doing as much as I can in that space. So simply put, that's kind of restoring the earth through nature's like system, natural restoration systems versus man-made systems as well. So that's kind of what I kind of started this journey with through my work at Just Dig It, and kind of I want to steer back into as well. So yeah, that's definitely what kind of fuels me.
I think that generally we are moving forward. I observe it and I think so. Maybe we're not going exactly, unfortunately, with the lines of the Paris Agreement, but we are moving forward. Look at the United States, look at the EU. There are always controversies about certain policies, and many of them are imperfect, to say it smoothly. But we are going forward with the Green New Deal in Europe, with the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States, and even with some oil, exporting countries which are even investing some amount of funds into the renewables. Of course, we need to increase the way of change. That is for sure. That is granted. We got to do it. But I think we are not starting from scratch. And maybe in a perspective, next year this will be an important year for climate. This will be the 55th anniversary of Earth Day, starting with Earth Day. It will be 10 years from Paris Agreement. That is why COP in Belém is so important. And with that, this will be the next round of the NDCs, so nationally determined contributions, so countries' commitments to the Paris Agreement and the UNFCCC, and I think this will be a very good mark to see what progress we have really made for the last 5 years. And if this will not be enough, then I hope it will be a shock for us that will be as an alarm that would put us forward,
Maybe shock therapy is coming rather than hope. Is that what you're telling us, Johnny? It's time.
Shock therapy.
Yeah.
Very diplomatic, but
On that note.
on that note.
We're going to finish up here by saying a big thank you and a big labus to our lovely volunteers who came to speak today.